and welcome to Mentality Meets, conversations that explore mental health stories and strategies to help leaders like you change the culture of mental health in the workplace. I'm Peter Larkham, and I'm the mental health instructor and expert and your host today. Today we're going to be talking to Denise Stephenson, the founder and CEO of the charity Reach Out to Kids, which she started as a non-profit social enterprise 10 years ago to bring change in the fields of race, diversity and social mobility. With over 20 years experience as a planning lawyer, Denise also is a proficient negotiator and public communicator. And she advises companies on their strategies for engaging more diverse and inclusive recruitment methods. In this session, we discuss the importance of tackling the issues of race at every opportunity. So this year, Mentality Meets is part of a new mental health initiative called Mindshift Forum 2021, which is all about walking the talk of mental health to help us live a better 2021. So this month's challenge is all about building resilience and not being afraid to ask for help. So Mindshift Forum 2021 also includes a monthly live video with me. This month is Mentality Meets, and next month we'll be doing a live discussion and question and answer session called Peter Larkham Live. So if you want to get access to the monthly challenge emails, as well as the live Mentality Meets and Peter Larkham Live, then you can sign up on my website. It's all completely free. Just go to peterlarkham.com and sign up. For all those watching on YouTube, like this video, leave a comment and hit the subscribe button to get the latest content to help you with your mental health journey. Let us know in a comment below what you want to hear about in the future and share with your friends and family. You can also check out all that we have to offer at peterlarkham.com. Now let's not wait any longer. Here's my conversation with Denise Stephenson.
My name is Denise Stephenson, as you know, and I am, I wear so many different hats. So I'm a lawyer, so I've been a lawyer for 22 years, but I've kind of temporarily hung up that hat. I'm a founder and CEO of a charity called Reach Out to Kids, which I have ran for 10 years. So I was running that whilst I was a partner at a law firm. I'm a first, as in I was the first Black partner at the law firm that I worked at. That law firm had been going for almost 200 years or over 200 years. So that was an amazing feat, but also very painful, I suppose, in some way. I'm also a podcaster, so I run a podcast with my sisters called the Startline Podcast, and I'm also a founder of a running crew called Emancipated Run Crew, which creates a safe space for people of colour to run and run free. I'm located in London. I'm in Southeast London, and passionate about race and racism. And the reason why I'm talking to you today is because I have been doing some talks on race and racism. So whilst on the back of the Black Lives Matter movement and the George Floyd murder, I was asked to do a number of talks, and I have been doing various talks on race and racism and my experiences. And I just thought it would be a great opportunity to come and speak to you, Peter, because I love how you've positioned it, that you are a middle-aged, I don't know if you're middle-aged Dalmatian, but middle-aged white man who is aware of racism, but not really aware of the part that you play in that and what you can do to kind of address the issue of racism in your sphere, in your circle. So, yeah.
Knowing that this was coming up, Denise, I tried to raise this with my family too. And all that was coming back at me was, we're not racist. But there was very little that was trying to explore or understand that we may, without realising, treat people differently based on colour or gender or sexuality and then my mind kind of went racing to religion or politics and there are so many different things that we can be prejudiced about, which then creates this discrimination process. And at the moment, kind of, it's really for me about the race side of things, because what I want least of all is to be a different person in a different situation. But I also know that if I was the only white man in a black community, I would feel really out of place and culturally really at a loss with this. And my question to you, Denise, and I suppose kind of my question into the audience also, is how do I begin to understand this mindset that I shouldn't be ashamed of who I am, but also I shouldn't make other people feel ashamed of who they are? And then how on earth do I do that? Have you got... I don't even know whether that question makes any sense.
I think it's important to say a few things. I think it's important to say that we shouldn't apologise per se for the people that we are. We've got to remember that we are all constructs of the society within which we live. Okay, so the fact that you are a white man who has certain privileges, and I'm a black woman who may not, isn't your fault. So we don't choose where we're born or how we're born or whatever. I'm certainly not going to apologise for being a black woman, because I love who I am, and I would hope that you would say I love who I am as a person as well. But as I said before, we've got to recognise that we live within a certain construct, which means that historically, or has meant that historically, which continues to date, the lens of the world has always been from a white worldview, okay? And everything that has been created structurally has been done to secure or maintain that worldview and that position, okay? So when we're talking about white privilege, using Sarah's example, and people get a bit defensive about it, and I've seen people, working class people saying, I don't have any privileges, I don't know what you're talking about. We've got to think, well, actually, what does that mean in practice? Having that privilege means that I can turn on the television and 9 times out of 10, I'm going to see white people on the television screen. That I can walk into an environment as a white person and there'll be many other white people around me. So case in point, we were watching the Chelsea Flower show yesterday, my sister and I, and we were looking at it and thinking, where are the people in colour? You're in Chelsea. Okay, Chelsea's quite an affluent area. However, we're in London. And so, but it was very proper and, people with, very influential people who were very affluent, and the tickets are expensive. And that perpetuates that sort of that worldview or that position that white people will have privileges that aren't afforded to other people, and people of colour mainly. So that is important to recognise. The other thing to say is that when we're thinking about racism, we've got to remember that there are 2 sides to it. There's the overt racism where white people can say, I'm not racist. I don't have a racist bone in my body. I have black friends, which is normally the usual thing that gets people in stitches, actually. So there is that piece. And, there is a fairly smallish minority of people that can hand on heart say, yeah, no, I'm racist and I don't like you as a black person and I'm going to make you know about it and I'm going to beat you about the head, etc., etc. There's another side of racism, which is more, I describe it as a kind of a serpent. It's a kind of an invisible snake that weaves its way through society. And it's so subtle that you can hardly notice it. But we're all victims of it. Even myself, I myself as a black woman, will see a group of black boys walking down the road and feel a little bit uncomfortable because society, the media, the government, all of these institutions that are holding up racism and racist attitudes tell you that that group of black boys are bad, when actually you know nothing about them. They could be going to drama class. They could be going to dance class. They could be doing anything, not necessarily bad. So we need to recognise that there are these institutions and organisations which perpetuate racism. And that actually has come out, Boris Johnson, whatever you may think of him, I don't particularly like him at all, because he perpetuates those messages. He subtly perpetuates those messages and reinforces. So all of this thing about being woke, all of these messages that they're kind of bringing out, even on the back of the Black Lives Matter protests, the report that they brought out last year about the fact that there is no institutional racism in the UK, and then following that up with the report on working class white boys and how they're suffering and how we need to be supporting them, pitting one group against each other and just continuously feeding that, continually perpetuating that. So your question is, what can I do as a white man to kind of overcome these things? I think in all of this, first thing to say, we're all learning. This is all new to us. As I said to you at the beginning, Peter, we're just starting to have these conversations with people outside of our racial group. Okay, so Black people have been talking about racism all the time because, I say, it's our experience. Not that we wear it on our shoulder or carry it on your back, but you are subjected to it almost on a daily level. Every time you go into the workplace, you will be facing a level of microaggression or questioning about your abilities or being called aggressive when really, if another colleague was doing it, that would be termed as assertive. So there are these things that you endure, I suppose, as a person of colour. And what white people can do, or what you can do yourself, is conversations like this, opening up the drawbridge and saying, I'm going to jump in and really learn about this myself. And teaching yourself, delve into the history of the UK, really take a hard look at it and ask questions around, why is this not taught in the education system? Why is the contribution of Black and brown people in this country not taught in our education system? And how are we going to do that? How are we going to make that change? You can be campaigning to your children's schools about that. And also it's about not expecting Black people or brown people to solve the issue of racism. It's not our problem. We didn't create it. So it's not down to us to solve it. We've all got to do our part, including white people. We've all got to do our part in addressing these issues. That's a long response to your question. There's a lot there.
There is a lot there. What I think I am most aware of and potentially most afraid of is either I raise the conversation around discrimination and race within the work that I do and make a thing out of it, or I don't and therefore completely diminish the context of discrimination and race. Because the work that I do is around kind of mental health, there is definite statistics out there that say that minority groups, including the race, sexuality, gender and everything else like that, there is definite statistics that say if you feel like you are marginalised or discriminated against, your mental health is going to struggle in the context of that. But I'm also aware that if I have delegates in the room of colour, then I raise it, it feels like I'm making a point of it. But I'm also aware that if I don't raise it, then am I simply merging it into the background and saying, well, it's not really an issue. And I always struggle with that feeling because I never quite know the right way to hit the discussion, because I want to kind of tackle it in a bear hug, you know. I want to really grapple with it to try and understand how to be an advocate and help people understand that actually the institutionalized racism, there must be, because actually I didn't even know it existed, you know, until a couple of years back, not because I am in an institute, but the entire country, I think, in one way or another, is fairly institutionalized. And can you help me see what racism looks like from your side of things? Because I've never experienced it, I don't even know what I might be doing or saying or acting like. This is the concern, is that how am I meant to tackle discrimination if I don't even know that what I'm doing or saying or being like is being discriminatory? And I'm aware that I may be being discriminatory in this entire conversation. So
no.
Can you help me try and understand this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the way in which I try and recognise that question for myself and try not to get angry about it is, I don't know what it's like to be a gay person. I'm heterosexual. I can't possibly know what that experience is like, or suffering in terms of discrimination. I can understand the feeling of being excluded and marginalised because that's what I've experienced. But I don't get it because I don't walk in those shoes. And I think that is what white people essentially are saying. But I think it's fairly so that I can accept on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's a little bit just disingenuous to say that, because you must see it, as in the fact that you will walk into certain spaces and there's not a single Black person, or you will go into a company, and sit on a board and there's not a single Black person, but you don't question why, and it's about starting to ask those questions, about raising the conversation. It is a delicate balance. And unfortunately, you're going to get people who lob those bombs at you in terms of you being woke or you getting on a bandwagon or whatever it is. But you've got to make the decision. I'm going to continue to have this conversation because it shouldn't be swept under the carpet, because it is too important for us to disregard. And if we want to make a change in our societies in terms of race and racism, we've got to get in the trenches. We've got to roll our sleeves up and do our part. So it is about maybe caveating and saying, I'm truly committed to this conversation. I'm truly committed to taking action and doing something about it. So when I raise this in conversation, honestly, I'm not getting on a soapbox. I'm calling it out because it needs to be called out. It needs to be discussed. It needs to be addressed and issued, and the issues tackled. So when I was trying to qualify as a lawyer, I was very young when I decided to become a lawyer. I was 14. And I would tell my teachers and they would say, Denise, that's not for you. It's not for you at all. I don't think you'll be able to do law. Law is too hard for you. Now, it could be that because they didn't see that I was able enough to do that. It could be. But by and large, all of the teachers that I spoke to came to me with that message. And I, when I was a little bit older, spoke to other friends of mine. My sister-in-law was a case in point. And by and large, most of my peers who were Black were told, no, you can't do that. You're not capable. So then I discovered actually there's a pattern here. So it was my head teacher. He was the only one that said to me, Denise, if you're really serious about pursuing a career in law, here's a book. It was called The Introduction to Law. Read that. And if you're serious about pursuing this law thing, I'm going to help you. And he did. He was the only one. Fast forward, I'm qualified. I'm working in law. I do planning law, or I used to. And I would go to planning inquiries regularly. So I would sit behind a barrister. I would be the only Black person in the room. And I can say countless times the amount of people that said, is she to help? Is she here to make tea? Is she everything but you're the lawyer in the room who's instructed this barrister and who's helped to put this case together? everything but that. I've had instances where people have come up to me when I used to have long hair, my hair in extensions, tugged on my hair and said, "What is this rope?" Which completely unacceptable. And I was so angry and upset. But I thought, Denise, just respond to this in a professional manner. Just tell them that they're being stupid or silly, and just walk away. There's been countless things like that. And people just not supporting you in your profession or your career, and actually trying to block your path. So when I was trying to come up as a lawyer, numerous times I was, refused a training contract, and you couldn't really assess the reason for that. But then you'd have a white person who's younger than me come in and get the training contract. So, things like that would happen regularly. I've been spat on. So when I went to law school, I went to law school in Chester. We were in a club, and I was with my ex-boyfriend then, and he was a white guy. And a guy came up behind me and gobbed on my back. And I told my boyfriend then, and it was just, he was tearing the place up trying to look for this person. So, there's been more subtle experiences, and, obviously, growing up in a council estate means that you see certain things, you see certain people getting privileges and you're not. And so that's all swept up in class. And, this country does have a distinct problem with class and race, and it does not admit it. It does not admit it because it wants to be seen as this progressive country, where everyone is welcome. But actually, that's not the reality. Racism is endemic in the healthcare system, in employment, in education, in housing. Everywhere you look, it's touched, it's infected by this disease. I call it a disease, which is racism.
Wowza. I love this conversation. This is, I suppose, I knew it was there. You say, you must know. And looking back, I must have known. Because it's not a huge surprise, which is why I can quite happily go, I'm not racist. But I hadn't fully appreciated just how vile it gets.
And I haven't suffered, I haven't suffered half of what other people have suffered, So last year with the Black Lives Matter movement, and actually on the back of George Floyd, myself and I think maybe every person of colour suffered some level of trauma. So that's where you get into the question of how does racism impact people mentally and physically. I had friends telling me, male friends, grown, they cried because it took them back to a place where they were discriminated against, where they had been hauled by the police, stopped and searched so many different times. Professional people, like I have a friend who's a CEO of a charity, pulled over by the police various times just because he's driving a nice car. And not only just pulled over, but really kind of antagonized and sometimes taken down to a police cell for no reason other than the color of their skin. No other reason. You couldn't put it down to anything else. And that's been going on for centuries. That's been going on for years. The Windrush scandal and everything that's come out of that, people have suffered and are still suffering. I listened to a podcast the other day, and it's really telling. But the podcast host said, and this is going to sound really harsh, but unfortunately it's true. Whilst white people are catching up on this discussion of racism and trying to educate themselves and trying to open their minds, Black people are dying and suffering, and that is the reality of the situation. So, if you haven't seen or didn't know about racism, now's a great time to start learning and start educating yourself, and not necessarily asking people, what should I do? But just going and looking yourself and doing some groundwork yourself and really thinking, as I said before, let's have a look at the history and how we got here, because without that, we don't know where we're going. So you have to teach yourself about how we got here in order to have a clearer vision on where we're going and what you want to do and how you can contribute to that and how you can make a difference and a change.
Oh, okay. What I'm liking about this is that I feel like I'm really being challenged just in my own little world of how I interact with my kids and talk about racism. And Sarah's got a great question here. She said, during the experiences, so you were talking about the experiences you've had where people have been vile towards you, and she said, did anyone around you stand up for you or intervene? Does it help if other people's intervene? And then thinking of the perspective of being an ally. Do you know what I mean? It's like, when is it right to stand up and say, oi, that's wrong? And when does doing that actually it disempower the person from standing up for themselves?
I get it. To answer Sarah's first question, no one stood up for me. No one. And you often get those scenarios where, so for example, when I was at Westminster City Council and I was working as an admin assistant there at the very beginning of my legal career, I was just dipping my toe in the water. The person that I used to work to, almost on a daily occurrence, would shout at me, like really bullying, really horrible experiences. And we used to work in offices where there weren't open plan. We had partitions, but the top bit was open, so everybody could hear across the space that we were in. And there were other lawyers in the room when this person was shouting at me regularly, almost daily. No one, not one of them, defended me. And the power dynamics were of such that I was the most junior person in the team. This was the head of the team. How am I going to stand up for myself? So using that second question that Sarah asked, should we be standing up? Absolutely, you have to call it out. Absolutely, particularly where the power dynamics are off. If you see racism or see discrimination or see an imbalance, you've got to call it out. And as a society, we tend not to do that. It's like when you see somebody having an argument on the train with a stranger, people don't want to get involved. They want to just keep to themselves and not, because they're afraid of the repercussions for themselves. But how do we change things if we don't? If we don't stand up for each other? How do you change things if you don't call it out? It doesn't change. And that's what racism wants to do. It wants us to keep silent. It wants us to stay in our own little individual bubbles and be selfish and just look out for ourselves, because then it will just continue on its merry way.
We'll get back to our interview in just a second.
Mental ill health costs UK employers around £1,700 per team member each year. That's a staggering £45 billion every year. Despite a general awareness that mental health is more of a problem than ever, most people have no idea what to do. This is where we can help. Mentality is a 1-hour video course equipping your staff to spot the signs of poor mental health and take action. Invest in your people, from the cleaner to the CEO, because every person, whoever they are, can be affected.
And now here's the second half of our interview. Shalene's kind of put a question out saying, if you see someone being beaten up, what do you do? And it's one of those things, Shalene, for me, again, kind of wanting to personalise it and put my hands up, is that in the past, I wouldn't have seen the two as equal. Does this make sense? I wouldn't have seen the verbal processing as the same as someone being beaten up. And Shalene just kind of but why?
I was going to ask you that. Exactly.
I don't know. Probably because, again, going back to that institutionalized process, is that firstly, you don't get in other people's business. This is kind of that feeling that you said about being in the train. And there's very much, I think it's a British thing that actually you don't get involved. And if someone was being beaten up, then I can see the visual damage and process. And so there is something inside of me that would then kick up and go, no, that needs to stop. Whereas verbal arguments and stuff, and especially kind of in the context of strangers, and you don't know whether they know each other. You don't know whether there's kind of anything else going on in the background. You don't know whether this is just a spat. And certainly, let's say public transport, because I've been in that situation where I have witnessed kind of this, and was actually really quite proud of how many people stood up to engage with this. But I think if it's kind of between two people, especially if they're giving as good as they're getting, there's a little bit of a dynamic of, I don't really know whether I should get involved with this. And
yeah, I mean, I get that, but often when you're in a work environment and you are, or even in the education environment, and you see a dialogue happening between people, it's not two people going on at it. It's usually a person in a position of power berating a person of colour, or picking out certain things that you know to be unfair, because it could be your work colleague, you know to be unfair. And so it is about saying, well, is it right that this person is aggressive? Aren't they being assertive? Aren't they just being firm? And exactly from Shalene, if they were white, if it was a white person, what would you do? What would you say? Would you just continue on your merry way and not think about it? Or would you kind of pipe up and say, well, actually, this person's got a point here?
I think that's a great question and dynamic. And I've got to admit, guys, I want to be as honest as I can be.
No. And it's not an attack.
Please feel free to shoot the messenger. That's kind of what I'm trying to say.
No.
And Christiana said in here, she said, also, we need to not rename these incidents as vile. She said, because they're racist. Call a spade a spade. Renaming a racist incident as something else actually diminishes it and becomes a part of the problem. So, Christiana, I totally want to hear that and acknowledge it, And then Shalene, kind of, if they were white, what would you do? And weirdly, if it was a white person and a white person, I probably wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, I was.
If it was a black person and a black person, I probably wouldn't do anything. Certainly more so if it was a black person and a black person, because I feel like I would properly put myself in the midst of this situation, and would feel totally alienated in that. But weirdly, if it wasn't a white person and a black person, I would probably have less of an issue with it, which then comes back to, so why do I? Because it's the white and black. And again, this comes back into my mindset, which is, why make a thing of it because it's black versus white, when actually, if I see both parties as equal, would I just... Does this make... I don't know if I'm even beginning to say the right thing.
Yeah, I think we're taking away from the core question that Sarah had in the first place, right? Which is, what is it that is being played out here? And obviously, you've got to think about context. So if you think about... So Sarah was responding to my comments about my experiences, okay? So my experiences was that teachers were telling me, no, you can't. If there was another teacher, would they stick up for me? No, they wouldn't. Why not? In the context of me being mistaken for the tea lady, where I was training commissioners for the Infrastructure Planning Commission, as it was then at the time. And so it was a big thing. These people were very important people. And a white lady came up to me, and I was hosting, so I was training them for the day along with other partners in the firm. And I was hosting, so I was doing teas and coffees, and she came up to me and she said, she leaned in and she said, oh, for a minute there, I thought you were the tea lady, but I thought, and she just left it there. And I said to her quite properly, no, I'm not a tea lady. I am one of the partners at this law firm, and I'm training you this morning. she went bright red. So just in case I thought, is this me? And that's another element, that gaslighting thing that we haven't even touched upon. Is this me? Or am I imagining it? Or is this real? Is she trying to tell me what I think she's trying to tell me? And why would you say that to someone? And if I was mistaken at all, her reaction told me everything I need to know. She blushed bright red. She stumbled over her words, and she said, "Oh, I didn't mean to offend. I was just, thinking." And so if you're stood next to me, why would you not say anything? Why would you not correct that person? But there was no defenders.
I want to come back to the gaslighting process, because it's so quick and so easy to kind of jump in on things and explode. And but I think when I've experienced situations, so I'm fairly small in stature, big in spirit. I think that's how I view myself. That I'm
You don't come across as small in stature at all.
Well, that's because I'm taking up most of the screen here, Denise. There's a deliberation of why I've done this like this. But I can remember being in a training room similar to kind of getting everything ready, and one of the people thought I was the technical guy coming in to sort out everything. I was like, no, I'm here to do your training today. And it really puts you on a back foot of kind of, what do I need to do differently to prove who I am and prove my state, and so totally that feeling. But just kind of talk me through this gaslighting comment and process for you.
It's when you say, and it happens a lot in the work environment, I think. It's when you say, I have suffered, so somebody's being discriminatory towards me in some way, shape or form. They have said this, or they have made me feel like this. So in the case of a sort of a senior boardroom scenario that I come back to, you might be the only Black person in the room. You may have made a very valid point or suggestion, but be shut down and say, and be told, well, no, that's not a very good idea. And then in the next breath, your white colleague makes the same suggestion, and everybody around the room says, oh, fantastic idea, fantastic. And you might take that to your manager and say, actually, I felt a bit slighted and felt undermined and felt that my contribution was not warranted. And again, there's no other reason why your suggestion was not accepted, apart from the fact that you are the only Black person in the room. And your manager says, no. Must be some other reason why that happened, and tries to justify or excuse what's happened in the room. So you see this quite a lot in relation to the Euros, which just happened, and everything that happened with the Black players. And there was some commentary around the fact that, oh no, it's not really, all of those racist comments weren't really racist comments. People were just angry about the fact that they missed the goal. Absolute and utter crap. Absolute and utter crap. And that's how you being the media, or you being that person making that observation, tries to gaslight people of colour by making them feel as if what they're experiencing is not really what they're experiencing. So it's kind of, you could feel as if you're going slightly mad, because you start to question yourself, Tommy, did that really happen? Did I really interpret that in the right way? When that person made that comment about my hair or wanting to touch my hair, is it that I'm being overly sensitive, or is it really racism? Really? And you experience it all the time. And as Black people, we just get used to it, but it's not right and it's not okay.
Absolutely. Oh, brilliant. What I'm beginning to hear and what I'm beginning to understand is that if I am in a situation where I feel that racism is a part of the processing of people or the conversation, or there is anything that is undermining someone, then I shouldn't be afraid to stand up. I shouldn't be afraid to call it out and say, hang on, that's wrong.
Yeah.
What I'm also beginning to understand and explore, and I kind of want to, I'm a little bit nervous about this one because it's the conversation around kind of the arguments and kind of white person versus white person having an argument where they're basically kind of dissing each other, and that versus the white person and the black person kind of doing exactly the same process. And the question of, well, why would I not stand up for either of them? Do you know? I can't even verbalize what I'm thinking. Because my temperament is, I'd much rather not get involved. But I feel like what I'm being challenged to do is actually, why let any form of negativity around people, why let that go? Why be okay with that and not stand up for people, regardless of colour and race?
I suppose the key thing at the end that you said there is regardless of colour or race. We are talking about racism, and it's important to distinguish that. So in the context of your question, which I think is, if I wouldn't interfere if it was a white person speaking to another white person, why would I interfere if it's a white person speaking to a black person? And they're both going at loggerheads, right? And I'm trying to get you to come away from that scenario, because I think with that particular question, only you can answer that. I can't answer that for you. What I can say to you is that if you come across, it doesn't present itself. Racism often doesn't present itself in that explicit way. You often don't see two people going at loggerheads, to each other. It's more subtle than that. And maybe it's so embedded that as a white person, you can't readily see it. But actually, I think that there is some part of you or white people that do see it. It's just that they don't really want to take up the mantle, or in some cases, they don't care, which is a much harder nut to crack. But if you see some injustice, which you know in your gut that there is no other explanation for this apart from racism, you have got to call it out. And that's what I'm saying. You've got to call it out.
I hear that, and Sarah's just put a question in the chat where it says, Pete, if you saw a white man being aggressive or abusive to a white woman, would you intervene? There's no doubt in my head, and so why why do I struggle to see it? Why do I struggle to see the same context against any person of race? And says, what worries you most about intervening is, I honestly don't know. Honestly, no idea.
Okay, so I think I don't know if you ever saw, I can't remember the name of the woman who did in the 50s did that experiment with white children to get them to understand about racism. And
yes, I know the one you mean.
Yeah. So imagine, I don't know if you've got kids, but if you do, imagine if you had one child with blue eyes and another one with brown eyes, and you know that your child with blue eyes was being discriminated against because they had blue eyes, and only because of that. Would you not step in and defend your child, or would you not step in and defend your friend? You would, because you know it's wrong. And that's the thing that we're saying. It's as silly as that. And that's why racism is so stupid, but so entwined and embedded in the society that we live in.
So I have another question for you, Denise, and that's such a great example of just how petty it is. So I've got another example, and over the road from where I live is another kid from my son's school. So yes, I have kids. I have 3 of them. And my son doesn't get on with this boy. And now he's of Chinese origin, come across to this country. Kind of the parents have very little English. And so I am constantly amazed at their ability to have conversation. But they're wanting to organise a play date. And everything inside me is going, yes, we need to support this. We need to encourage this. But also I've got to understand that my son actually just doesn't get on with this kid. They don't play together. They don't kind of engage with each other at school. And so then there's another side of me going, hang on, am I forcing something? Or am I trying to force something in the context of this? And I want to know. I want to be told what to do, Denise. Because on the one hand, I don't want my son to be in... I don't want him to kind of... I don't even know what to say.
So basically, like, yeah, Christiana's just put in a very good question. Have you asked your son why he doesn't get on with this little boy?
So my son is very much a girly friend boy. So all of his friends at school at the moment are girls. So he's 8 years old. He's not into football or the other kind of stuff that the other boys would be into. So has quite a niche little kind of group of friends. So him going to or having any of the other lads in the class over for a play date would feel weird to him, you know? And that's just because he doesn't engage in the same way. So have I asked my son why? No, I haven't actively said, can I just ask, why don't you like this other boy? But I'm also aware that actually at the moment, the majority of his friendship group are girls anyway. So
and you can't force it. I mean, you know, that is just something that, you know, kids aren't gonna. We don't all get on. You know, there are personality clashes all the time, but you shouldn't be kind of trying to facilitate something that's wouldn't naturally occur. You know, if the rationale for it was all of his friends are white and he doesn't have a single friend of colour, and so therefore there's an issue there would be an issue. You'd need to have a conversation with your son. But it doesn't sound like that is the reason to me.
No, and it doesn't feel like it's the reason to me either. But also I'm very aware. So I live in a very white community, like very white community, and we have kind of different shops that are popping up where we're getting different nationalities into our shopping space. And I'm loving it because it forces us to kind of engage with this and forces my kids to actually see people of different colours and different cultures. But also for them at the moment, I mean, they're 8, 5 and 3, so they're still small. They're still trying to understand kind of the context of all this. And I just want to be able to do it well. I don't want to force it, but also I don't want to dismiss it either. So Christiana's now put, what else are you doing to support your children to see different cultures and different people? And this is where, for me, I'm trying to find every opportunity. And children are never too young to have already experienced racism. And I find that so heartbreaking, actually. Children are never too young to have already experienced it.
They are talking about, I mean, you know, young people suffer racism. Very young kids suffer racism at school, very, very young. I think I heard something on Women's Hour, I think it was, about a mother of a young girl who, her mum is white, the child is mixed race. And a young boy, she was only like 6, and a young boy went up to her and said, does your mommy still love you even though you're brown? So they're never too young. And, you know, it is about, you know, let's get books and let's show them films and let's introduce them to different cultures in that way, you know, so that it's kind of normalized, so that they're seeing people of color as well as white people within their sphere, and it's not alien to them. and making sure that we're having those conversations with them. If they do come to you and say to you, such and such at school who is brown or black said this, and somebody else said that, and it's about, well, what learnings can we learn from here, and what can we teach our children about what's wrong with racism, So it's about feeling empowered enough to have those conversations with them. But I think one other thing, one of the things, Peter, that we were talking about at the very beginning was trying to ensure that you don't adopt the white savior complex, which is something that, a lot of white people are kind of experiencing or trying to avoid, or some people would just jump on that bandwagon, that Black Lives Matter bandwagon, and say, yeah, we support Black Lives Matter, and we're going to come in and save the day and blah blah blah. Don't do that. It's patronizing, it's insulting. It is about playing your part, but not thinking that you're swooping in with a Superman cape to save these poor black and brown people. We don't need that. Thank you very much. It's that kind of, so that there's a balance there that needs to be adopted. And that might sound quite harsh, but I don't mean it to be, but actually it just has to be said. You might have to sleep on it.
I think I will. I think my mind is being fried at the moment with so many different processes, and I found this so helpful. And as we draw this to the close, I really want to say thank you for allowing me to explore this topic further with you. I thank you for just your insight into helping me understand this better. And I hope our audience also feel like they've been on a journey through this. I feel totally bamboozled by it. And like you say, we're not going to fix it overnight. But actually, as I engage with this conversation to the best of my ability, and as I do my utmost to impart that into my children and tackle this, then hopefully the next generation will be in a better place than we are at the moment. Oh my gosh, I feel completely bamboozled. Now, as we move into the rest of this week, let's please tackle issues of racism wherever we may experience it. If you can also find out more and connect with Denise Stephenson by visiting speakerscollective.org. So next time, in 2 months' time, which is November, we'll be talking with Ben Jones. And we're going to be talking about the topic of hopelessness and asking the questions, have you ever lost all hope? And so, on that note, I hope you enjoy this episode of Mentality Meets. No matter where you are on your mental health journey, you can find plenty of content and information about our resources at peterlarkham.com, including one of our mental health courses for you and your business. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, where you can find our entire back catalogue of conversations with mental health leaders and experts. And if you want to spread the word, drop us a review on the podcast app and share this with your friends. Thanks again for joining us for Mentality Meets, conversations that explore mental health stories and strategies to help leaders like you change the culture of mental health in your workplace.